Hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff and another first impressions video, and this time we're looking at Tamiya's Famo SDAH 116, which is a tank transporter. Okay, so this kit has been out for some time. Now when I double checked, I was surprised to find that this came out 20 years ago. I bought one of these when they first came out, and I built it in pretty much in the format you see on the cover of the box. So I do know this kit a bit more deeply than what we just see in the box. Although it is a little while since I built it. So actually you've got a 22-year-old kit here. This came out hot on the heels of Tamiya's Dragon Wagon, which had been a really successful kit, and I built that as well. It was a really lovely kit, and when this came out it really raised the bar. So we get this, it's a typical Tamiya style box where you've got a picture, an artist's impression of the model, but no background or scenery. And pretty much what you see here in colour is what you're going to get in the box. You're going to get the figures, you're going to get the trailer with those figures. So it gives you an idea. Then at the top here we have another view of it, full length, side profile with a tank on it, which you don't get, but gives you an idea of how it works. And then if we look at the side, we've got the same information as we've got on the front. That's the same on both sides. On this side here we've got a more close-up focus on the tank transporter trailer. Now, the trailer is quite interesting because this end bit here separates and this drops down to become a ramp. So it wasn't a quick process to get something on the trailer, let's say that. Then we've got some information in Japanese. And then on the other side, we have the same picture that we've got on the top here, but blown up on the side. Again, most of the text is in Japanese, so it doesn't make any sense, but it gives you a view of the other paint option that's going to be in here, which is the sort of German standard grey blue. Okay, and somewhere on here will be a kit number. Okay, so item is 35246. So it's a reasonably good size box, and it comes divided into two, as is quite often done with Tamiya. We have a lot of plastic sprues here. We're right up to the top of the box. There is not much space in here. Then we have a separate box in here and a divider that's stapled in. So the box bottom is not too bad. It's not up to trumpeter's standard of thick boxing. The lid is really thin, and it's something Tamiya needs to be looking at, in my view. But anyway, so everything's individually wrapped in stapled bags, as is Tamiya's way, and then we've got our instruction manual, which is on the top. So let's have a look at the instructions first of all. Okay, so the instruction book is A4 stapled black and white. As we can see, it has a picture of the included model on the front in a landscape, I guess because of the size of it. And then when we get into the instructions, we're moving to portrait. So we have some history. We have a nice couple of sketches there. I really like this one with all the barrels on. That could be fun to recreate. And then, as is standard for Tamiya, we have some conversation around tools, making sure you read the instructions, health and safety and caution advice, and then we get stuck into the build. So step one here starts with the construction of the engine. Now, you can obviously build the Famo with all its engine compartments closed, in which case most of this won't be seen, but they do supply you with a couple of little wooden blocks. So what you can do is build the engine up, put it on some blocks and put it on the back of the Famo as part of its cargo, part covered by a tarpaulin or whatever you fancy. So you do have some nice options with this. It's Tamiya, it builds up nice, there's no fit issues. We're having the paints called out as we go. That all the Tamiya paints, as you would expect, promoting their own brand. Cleanup of these parts is quite minimal, but we'll have a look at the parts later. And it builds up into quite a nice looking engine. Then we move on and we see that we're building up the chassis. So it's quite a part heavy chassis. So we've got internal parts going into this big frame, and then we've got castings being glued into place, and then we've got these little things here. Don't know what they're called, but they're basically bump stops for the wheels. So they'd have little rubber tips. Then we've got the transmission there, and actually says air tank. That's one nice thing about Tamiya instructions. It tells you what these things are as you go through them. So we build those as sub-assemblies prior to fitting. You can see here the engine goes on these engine mounts, transmission, this air tank, which I'm guessing is for the brakes, is it? I'm not really au fait with truck mechanics. Then we've got these things here are the exhausts, and you can see they're sort of gluing in there. The exhaust will go on later and fit underneath, but yeah, it all tucks in. And then you've got the little parts that go in, which we're going to mount the wheels on. Then we're building up the wheels. As you can see, we're using polycaps, and we're building up quite an authentic looking wheel. Actually, when you've built it and painted it, it looks really nice. We build up the exhaust, we flip over and we put the twin exhausts in place at the same time as we're adding the wheels. Notice that it says don't put glue on here, because actually these wheels will move and the tracks will actually work once it's built up. We're then putting the tyres on. Then we have front suspension being built up. So I seem to remember the suspension was movable and steerable and sort of worked. So yeah, you can see it's quite busy. You've got the frame with the spring suspension, and then we build up quite a few parts on top of that. The wheels go on, and you get something that looks quite authentic when it's finished. Then we've got some other parts being put together, which has our towing hook, and it's that sort of a towing hook assembly which goes in the rear here. And then we're adding the front suspension that we've built up, and that all swings and pivots on that point. This is to do with the towing hook. So it's basically, there's a bit of string, as I remember, which is put in there, and you can wind it up. You can see it there. We glue it's supposed to represent wire, steel cable. And then we have an eye that we glue in at the end. But yes, that I seem to remember that works as well. Then we get into what looks like a very simple step for what is quite a task, actually. So we've got individual link track, which is made up of the metal cast link and then the rubber block separately. Now the rubber block sits in a metal casting in real life, and Tamiya have captured that, but it means that you have to paint the plastic, the sort of the cast link individually,
The same colour is then going on. They're using gunmetal here. I wouldn't. I'd use a different colour. And then the bottom rim of the rubber block is painted in the same colour as the metal, and then you paint in the metal block. So there's quite a bit of painting to be done, which is best done on the sprue before you assemble all of this. But it is working, and basically the link just fits over there, and then it's the block being glued into place that seals it in. It's a very good system. It works really, really well. And once you've painted all the parts, you can build it up quite quickly. But it does make me smile that this step just is you put that in there, you put that on there, and then you've done all those. Yeah, it takes quite a bit of time. It's quite a big step, that. Once you've done your tracks, and obviously you're going to want to have painted the chassis and done all that first, you're then building up the radiator. You've got the forward lamps, what we would call the bumper in the UK. Then we've got some interior cabin detail, some tools, and your driving gear and pedals and so on. And then as we pass through onto step 17, we're building up the bulkhead of the cabin and what have you. So it's an open drive cabin, this. We've got the cushions for the chairs, the seats going on, and then we flip it underneath and we've got some gussets and brackets to go on. The dashboard, it's a solid plastic dashboard, and they give you all the instructions for painting it. It's quite small. It can be done with an appropriate size brush. Then we're putting in the steering wheel and its connecting parts. The grab frame there with the little plastic formed latches for the rifles. So those are rifle points. Then we put in the bottom piece of the engine, and we're mounting this on the frame. It's building up the air filter and the windscreen. So you're supplied with some acetate, so you can build up the windscreen. You've got separate wiper motors there that go on. It all looks quite authentic when done. Then we've got the little foothold points that go in. You're building up your air filter, you put in your bonnet sides on, and the bulkhead to radiator supports. And that's pretty much built up the front of the vehicle other than the top of the bonnet at that point. You then move on to the back flatbed area of the Famo. So you've got a base and sides, and then at this point we're building up the back panel and the drawer units, and it has individual drawers that pull out, as I recall. Then we've got the support structure that goes underneath, showing you the alignment there. It's all very clear. And then as we progress through, we've got more wheels to build, spare wheel and the cage that goes around it. The tailgate drops down, so that can be up or down as you choose. The same with the ventilation openings on the top of the bonnet. So we put that on. We've got tail lights going on there. Gives you the colours for those. Shows you how far to open the bonnet openings if you wish. Then we move on to building up the rails for the flatbed. These look really quite nice if you make your own tarpauling over the top. But I actually have, which is what I did first time, I have an aftermarket one for this, which I will show you. Alternatively, you can stack them in their stowed position here and have the flatbed open, depending on what you're putting in the back of it, really. Then we have some peripheral smaller items, mainly grab handles, some lamps, and your width indicators. The little locking pin for the front toe loop. this is where we make up these individual drawers. You can see they're all slightly different, and it's nice to get some photo etch tools or something to put in those. That looks really good, especially if you're displaying it with them open. Then we've got some, we've got the jack, we've got some towing equipment there. That can all get stashed away. You can see the drawers can be open. Got a little decal there which has got sort of manufacturer's information on it, chassis number and all that sort of stuff on there, which is all lovely. And that, I'm going to just make that clear, I think. At step 28 completes the build of the Famo. So the instructions then move to the trailer, and we start with the rear unit. So this is the unit that separates and disconnects from the trailer so the trailer can drop down. So so we start with building up the frame of that with its suspension. We're using nuts and bolts to tie bits together. Here's interesting, where we've got the we've got an air cylinder on the back, and Tamiya supply you with their sort of stock plastic card sheet so that you can make your own straps there for the back. But the system works really well. If you use their measurements, you cut that out and it fits in perfectly well, and it looks really good when it's done. So it's a nice touch actually. We're building up the trailer arm there. That all moves. It's all movable. You can see it's been screwed together. We've got some, these are metal, like metal wire, formed wire rods. And then we can see it being constructed here. You can see that that's all movable. We've finished the construction of that front face. It's quite a complex little build. It's a model in its own right. We're putting the support beams on, and you can see we've got these little metal rods sticking out of the side there, awaiting for final assembly. Then we build up the axles. Two axles, you can see they're two different styles, and then we've got rods that connect them, and then under paint they look quite good. So you can see you've got all the pivot points to allow this front wheel to steer, and I think it's four-wheel steer as I remember that. So it can go round corners with it being a long vehicle. I think that's four-wheel steer. So and they've made it workable, which is really, really clever. It's a beautiful piece of engineering. It looks amazing when done. In fact, it doesn't do it justice. When it's finished, it looks more simple than it actually is. Anyway, it continues with these wood slats are going on. We put some finishing little touches like the cable rollers on, and then we're building up the wheels. We've got another jack to build. So the wheels go on, some tools, and then that is the end of that build for the moment, and we move on to, I think I'm right in saying we're moving on to the other part of the trailer then. So we can see we're building up that. We've got some chain that's going onto this like toolbox type thing, and that sort of forms the centerpiece of the chassis there. We've got quite a big plastic plate. You'll see that when we go through the kits. We've got a plastic plate there as the top part. It comes rigid at that point. Got all sorts of cylinders and bits and pieces to put on this. We've got more of these little metal rods being used, and quite a complex. All the sort of the movement and the detail has been captured in this. They must have gone and had a look at a real one, a surviving one in a museum to get this working. Then you're building up your axles and putting them on. This is a more simple build than the other one, I think. We've got another windscreen to build up, which again has die-cut acetate, which is really nice, and we're building up the seat there and the little steering mechanism for it. And we build up this little cabin, which then goes onto that trailer. We've got a winch there, which has real string for the steel rope. Some more little bits and pieces going on, steering wheel and the little step-up ladder which slides out and slides back in, so that actually works as well. We're making more strapping from plastic card which goes around these various tanks that go on here. And then you have the option of a little canopy roof cover, which I thought looked quite nice. But when you see pictures in the field, often they're down. Making up wheels once again. One of the features of this is lots of wheels, and that sort of completes that trailer or that unit. This is the main flatbed trailer here, and quite big long parts in their own right, and we're screwing these together with mechanical fasteners. Then we're building up sections that go on it. So we've got quite a complex bulkhead there, some framework that goes underneath that, which includes the loading ramps, I think. Then we've got more structure, side structure, ends. There's some very nice plastic chain included, which you cut to length and put on the shackles there. We've got more detail being added to the front of the trailer, and then it's showing you here we've got the little ramps to get you onto the trailer, and it's showing you how this all connects up. So you can load all this up, or you can attach them all on. So we've got lifting blocks and all sorts of bits and pieces included. So we attached the trailer unit at one end, then we're putting the drive unit on at the other end, and it's attached with screws. And then you've got a little connection point there to attach it to the Famo. Then it takes you through loading a tank onto it and what you need to do with hooks and the chain and how you would mount that front and back. And the length of chain will vary depending on what you're putting on the back. Now, when I build this, I'm putting a Polish tank on the back, so it's quite a bit smaller than this, so it might be interesting to see what we end up doing with that. So at step 57, you've pretty much built up your completed model, and we move on to the figures, and there's lots of figures included, as you can see. So we've got driver, we've got all sorts of support staff, we've got people sat on the trailer, we've got plenty of staff sat at the front, so you've got lots and lots of options there. Then they go on to explain how it works. Winching a tank on, so you've got options if you're building a diorama of how to go about that. It gives you a brief understanding and history of how that would work. And then we go on to the paint options. What it doesn't say here is if it was something like if they were covering something like a King Tiger, you'd have several Famos all pulling together because they were that heavy. But with these light tanks, it's less of an issue. Then we've got the colour guide. So it's saying 237th Stug Brigade, Russia, 1943, which is your sort of yellow camouflage version here. Then we've got the 109th Stug Brigade, Russia, Spring 44. And then we've got the Hermann Goering Workshop Battalion, Vehicle Maintenance Company, Germany, 1942. And finally here we've got Hermann Goering Workshop Battalion, Vehicle Maintenance Company, 1942. Again, I don't know if that's... Is that an extension of that? Yeah, it might be. Yeah, I think it's an extension of that. You've got some information about applying decals, aftermarket service, and information that I think you just generally can only use in Japan. That is the instruction. So before we get stuck into the plastic sprues, let's have a look at what came in that little box compartment in the box. Well, in there is a bag with lots and lots of these tyres. Now, I know some people don't like them, but there is absolutely nothing wrong with those. And when you've built it up, they do actually weight ever so slightly because they're very thin. There is a little bit of cleanup needed on them, but not much at all. And under a little bit of weathering, they look fantastic. So that's one of the things in the box. The other thing you get is the plastic card, which is used for the strapping, and you get plenty, so you've got spare when you've done. There's a couple of metal strips which are used for strengthening the trailer. One of mine seems to be slightly bent. I'm sure it'll flatten out when I need to. And then you get a bag full of goodies. So let's have a look what we get in the bag. So you get the now in recent kits they've replaced the screwdriver with a nice one with a spinny top, which is really lovely. But you get the traditional Tamiya screwdriver, which are great for getting into the batteries on the back of electrical items. Brilliant screwdrivers. They're almost worth buying the model kit just to get the screwdriver. We have some plastic chain. This is black and I can see a little bit of flash in places, which surprises me. Don't know if you can see that little bit sticking out. I'm fairly sure in my first kit this was the sort of the sand coloured plastic, this chain, not this black, but I might be wrong. 20-year-old memory. We've got a little bag which has these metal rods in that we saw being used in the instructions, and there is a couple of springs in there and some fasteners. We have another bag which has assorted screws and nuts. It is worth getting a magnetic tray for putting these in when you build this, so you don't lose anything. Then we've got a bag that has, these are the main windshields, and you can see it's die-cut acetate, so it's actually just held in with these side tabs, and you just cut them out and clean them off and you're away to go. It's really quite clever, I like it. And this is the same again for that other windscreen on the trailer unit. We have a card which has the thread on it, and this is to simulate the wire ropes used throughout the kit. Obviously it needs some colour putting on it, needs painting in like a steel colour. I don't remember how well this takes paint, but it doesn't look too bad, does it? And then lastly we have a bag with some loose polycaps in. There is some polycaps in with the wheels as well. So we've got two different lots of polycaps. The other thing that was in the box was this little bag with some figures in. So we've got 4 figures in total. These are the sat down figures, so I would assume these are the figures for the trailer. So there's 4 figures for the trailer, so they'd be in addition to the ones that came with the Famo kit before the tank transporter trailer was added to the kit. So these are effectively the additional figures. So we can have a quick look at those. So very clean, nicely moulded. Seams aren't too heavy. Poses are natural. He seems quite happy. He seems quite sad. And he seems quite happy. So hard to know. So we've got two figures there with 3 heads. And then we've got another 2 figures here. They're the same. I think they're the same. Yeah, so it's 2 sprues of the same. Okay, so let's have a look at the plastic. And we're starting here with Sprue A. There's 2 of these in a single bag. And as you can see, this is covering off many of the wheels. These are the wheels for the Famo. So we can see here, if you look closely, we've got a bit of texturing to give you an idea of them being like a pressed wheel or a casting, something like that. So there's a sort of a slightly sort of shot blast style texturing on the actual wheel, which is different to the shiny surface of the rubber. Other than that, you know, that as you'd expect from Tamiya, it's a very clean, clear mould. There's no visible ejector pin or flash or sink in any of this. I really liked what they did here. Quite often you used to see these wheels as sort of a single rubber tyre like this, but they did it with the rubber blocks correctly, and that was a nice touch, and generally people sort of do that now. Got to remember this was 20 years ago, and this was a groundbreaking model at the time. So your ejector pin marks are in the back and they're tiny, and when you put these together you're just not going to see them. So yeah. So we're now on Sprue B, and again we have 2 of these in a single bag, and we've got a mix of different parts here. So we've got parts of the suspension for the half track, the Famo, and some of the parts here that go into the chassis frame. We've got some form of gas tank which has straps on. And that's important because we saw in the instructions a lot of the tanks we're making our own straps for. And then some of these individual parts that we saw go on. And we've also got figures, and what Tamiya have done is, because we've got 2 sprues with 2 sets of figures with identical poses, what they've done is they've given us an additional head so that we can change the facial expression a little bit. So that's quite a nice little touch. We've got some tools here that can go in the tool drawers that we saw. So we've got a little oil can there, and then we've got D-ring shackles and wire cutters that we saw going into the under the driver's dashboard, and then these here are the wire rails that go into the flatback, so you can put the canvas on. And then we have the bump stops here, and finally the grab handles. So there's some very finely moulded stuff here. Some of it is probably a little bit thick by modern standards now, but at the time 20 years ago this was as good as it got. But it's still really lovely, very nice. The pose on the figures looks nice and natural. Sprue C, and this time we have 3 of these, and that's because we're now dealing with the individual track links. So what we can see is we've got the metal tracks, and then round the edge of the sprue we've got the rubber blocks. And if I can turn them over, you can see how nicely rendered they are. So you can see here, this little square area here, these fit into there, and then the rubber block goes on top. You can see the 2 little pins there fit into there. So you've got glue on those 2 top surfaces, which leaves this workable. So you can actually push this Famo along when you've built it, if you build it with care. You can see what I mean here about the rubber blocks. If I try and get this up close, you can see you've got the rubber block, and then you've got this lip that needs to be a different metal colour. So painting all this on the sprue makes the most sense. The sprue gate landing, this connection point here, when you've removed it, is not really visible. It might be visible on 1 or 2 that are going round the drive wheel, but other than that, your touch-up is minimal. So you can get away with painting all of these on the sprue, less so with the rubber blocks, unfortunately. But if you paint the rubber, you can then go around with a fine brush and paint individually the metal rims as you put them on. So there we go. A really nice solution for individual link track, no pins involved, and it's actually, once you get into the groove, it's quite a quick process. Sprue D is one of the larger sprues, and we've got a lot of the larger parts for the Famo truck on here. So we've got the front wheel arches, and the basis of the frame there, which we mount the radiator on. We've got this bulkhead here, which you build your dashboard up on, and we've got the floor pan, and we can see that that's all been textured with a diamond plate pattern. The grille isn't see-through, as you can see. It's solid on the other side. But once you've put a wash on that, you wouldn't necessarily know. It looks very authentic, and you can see the grooves are quite deep, a good 0.5 millimetre deep, and it does look the part. The seat has texture on it, and it also has little creases to make it look realistic and authentic. Bottoms and backs there, and they look quite nice. And we do have on these side panels for the bonnet, we do have the vents are open. And then we have, this is the bonnet. It has the various fasteners in place. Got a fuel tank there. The little step has textured waffle diamond tread on it. This is the cage for the spare wheel, if you remember. And then we've got windscreen, which has the wipers moulded on, and then you've got a little area there to mount the wiper motors behind it. And then we have a dashboard here, which, if you remember in the instructions, there was instructions to specifically paint that. Not much to see on the underside. Sprue E, which is another largish sprue, so that's got more Famo parts on. So we've got the exhaust system there, that front suspension that we saw that can pivot, various components for building that up, floor pedals, jack, various parts for the suspension, the transmission, and the rope winding mechanism. And we also have bits here for the engine block as well. And most of the detail is on this side. So Sprue F deals with other large parts on the Famo. So we have the running board here that goes above the tracked wheels. We have the sides of the flatbed there with the openings for the drawers. We have the drawer sides there. We have the sides here of the actual Famo. So there's 2 rows of seats there. So you've got the driver's position at the front, 2 rows of seats. Unfortunately, Tamiya decided to put the indicator rods moulded in. Would have been nice if they were separate parts, so we could have maybe moulded, had them sticking out like they were indicating, and just had some animation, but they chose not to. Then we've got the floor pan there. These little marks here are for the rifles to line up in. So this handrail with the little fastener brackets for the rifles goes above that, and the rifle sits in there. More nicely moulded and textured seats. And we've got various bulkheads. Then we've got the flatbed itself. Now the flatbed floor has lots of fasteners on. I'm assuming that this was a steel floor because there's no wood slats or anything like that depicted on here. But also when you get to the back of it here, these boxes, and this is where the if you imagine this goes along the side here and then those drawers go in on each side, it appears very bereft of any detail. I'm not sure it would have been like that. I thought we might have something like this on there, some pressing to give it rigidity. Now this could be right, but somehow it doesn't look like it, and it is the one part that sort of sticks out as looking a bit plain. However, it is what it is. And as we flip over, we can see we've got all sorts of detail there for the location points and what have you. The backs have the pressing marks, which looks really nice, and under paint this comes up really well actually. These are the doors for your drawer sections, and there is some little ejector pin marks that have to be dealt with if you're going to have the doors open, and we have little decals to go on those. So there's quite a lot of ejector pin marks on some of these parts that will need dealing with because they will be visible. Sprue G, smaller sprue, which focuses primarily on the engine build-up. So we've got air filters, the engine block there. Got the timing belts, which are a bit heavy, but it's not a problem to remove the timing belts and replace them with some strips of masking tape. Manifolds there. And then we've got the drawers. So you can see they build up with a drawer bottom with 2 sides, and then you put the end pieces on, and they look really nice under paint, to be honest. And some of the drawers have got components in them. There's some packets which have got texture on them, what looks like a couple of bearings maybe. And then we have the 2 wood blocks that you can put the engine on should you choose to not mount it into the Famo itself. And then we've got the fan, which again also the blades are a bit thick. If they were doing this again now, those would be thinner. So some of it's showing its age ever so slightly, but it's still amazingly good quality. And I can assure you this all goes together like a dream. So if you're buying just the Famo kit, what you've seen is where we'd get up to, and that's where you'd stop. What Tamiya kindly did when they put the tank transporter trailer into the kit is they kindly carried on with the sprue designations. So we're now on Sprue H, and we're starting to build up the trailer. So here we have more wheels, and these are the tanks that need to have the strapping added to it. And the reason they didn't mould it on is these straps sort of go round, and then they travel a distance between the tank and where they're sitting on, so they look a lot more realistic cut out of the plastic card. If they'd moulded them on, they'd look too heavy or wouldn't look quite right. So it was a really good solution. So yeah, there's quite a few screws and nuts involved in the assembly of some of this, and we can see the nut mounting points there. There's two of these in the same bag. We turn to Sprue J now, and we have two of these in the same bag again. So we're carrying on with the construction of the trailer, and this has some of the smaller parts on there. So we've got things like individual parts like this wooden block with a handle on it. So all sorts of blocks and tackle that's all used in the process of dragging a tank up onto the transporter and locking it in place. So there's like a ratchet bolt there, for example. We also have the ramps to be built up, and more wooden blocks, and the wooden blocks have lovely wood grain texture on them, at least on the top, not so much on the side where there's quite a heavy seam. Then we have some other tools, and we've got a little locking jack there, and various different parts. These parts here mount on there to lock these in place if you're having them stowed away. And we've got a figure, and again with two heads. So with two sprues we can have two different heads, one with a cap on, one without a cap on. And we've got two different sets of arms, so we can have different poses, which is quite nice. K is up next, and unusually this sprue was in a bag with another sprue which wasn't identical, Sprue M, which we'll see in a minute. So here we've got the components for building up the two sort of tractor units that sit either end of the trailer flatbed. And you can see there is some really nice wood grain detail been put into these wooden slats here, which is what makes me suspect that it's a steel bottom on the Famo flatbed, because they've pulled this out really nicely on here. And we've got the steering wheel, and we've got the chassis frames there and the cross beams for them. Everything is very crisp and precise and looks really nice under paint. Yeah, I mean, what can you say? It's Tamiya, you know it's going to be good. Sprue L, and this is, I think, the biggest sprue that we have, and it has a lot of the individual parts that are needed for the two tractor units. So we can see here we've got the end here, which has the towing hooks mounted. We've got bulkheads, we've got the mud guards there, different types of mud guards. Lots and lots of bits of framework that has to be assembled together. Yeah, I mean, it's complex without being overly part count burdened. So you could imagine that in a more modern kit from another supplier, you might have more parts than this. But Tamiya did a good job of making the construction clean, sensible, having enough parts to make it interesting, but not too many to make it overly burdensome to build. If you look at the mud guard there, you can see the moulding makes this is supposed to be a tube, and it doesn't look particularly authentic as a result of the moulding limitations. So that needs scribing out, unless you're looking at an aftermarket solution, and we'll perhaps look at that in a minute. And then we have Sprue M, and we have some more figures here. And again, we have more heads than figures, so we've got lots of flexibility in how these build up. We've got more tanks. The chain here is really nicely done, and we've got the sides there to the seat, and there's the seat there. The windscreen is nice and thin and looks in proportion and to scale and accurate. And then we have the cover here. So the Famo doesn't have the covers, but this did. The trailer part, and it doesn't look too bad actually. It looks quite natural. You don't often see photographs of it up, but yeah, I quite like it up. So this is the basic chassis frame for the Famo, and we can see here it says copyright 1999 on here, which is when the Famo first came out in its own right. It's a nice foundation for your build. It does have quite a lot of seam that needs clearing up, so there's quite a bit of clean up needed on this before you can start building anything on it. But it's a nice solid piece of plastic that sets you up for the build ahead. It's very nice. So the last bag has two parts in it, which make up the flatbed for the tank transporter trailer. So again, lots of lovely wood grain texture on here, and you've got the two end pieces that we build up and strengthen and correct in shape. The slats, although they don't have texture on, are depicted underneath. So even though they won't be easy to see, if you do glimpse them, they will look natural and correct. And we do have some ejector pin marks to sort out, but they're very, very mild and gentle, as they quite often are with Tamiya. Now the other part that's in the bag is part of the framework that goes underneath this, and you can see here it screws down with fasteners and goes on top, and then we build the sidewalls up. And we, if you remember, we had some metal strips. I seem to think the metal strips go in there as well to add rigidity to the whole structure. So it's a very well engineered and thought out bit of construction that, when you put it on, gives you this nice effect of having the separate framework. So finally we have the decals, and we have a relatively comprehensive decal sheet. There is nothing here for the dashboard, but we do have some signs, we do have some unit logos and number plates and the sort of things you'd expect on a vehicle. We've also got the red and white stripes which go on this rear trailer, this rear tractor here. As always with Tamiya decals, they're a little bit thick and need plenty of cajoling to sit properly, particularly these that need to go on a curved surface on the fenders. So there you have it, the Tamiya 135 scale Famo tank transporter. What are my first impressions? Well, as I've said, I have already built this once before when it first came out 20 years ago, and my impression of it is not much changed. It's beautiful kit.
It's not too challenging to build straight from the box, but complex enough to look very realistic and authentic. Tamiya did a really good job of the engineering of this, and 20 years later it really still stands up very, very well against the competition. I think because it's Tamiya, you know that it's going to build quite straightforward, and if you've just come back to the hobby or you're new to the hobby and trucks or Second World War, and is your thing, and this is something you're considering, absolutely go for it. Shop around. Prices vary a little bit. I think it was £95 when it first came out, so it's going to be three figures easily now. But do shop around. You can get the Famo separately if you wish, and you've seen what's involved in the Famo. And if you buy the Famo kit, you basically get everything that you see here. And what this kit did is add this back end on. So yeah, it's a lovely kit. I know it builds well. There is quite a lot of aftermarket stuff available or been available for it. So storage equipment for the flatbed at the back, for example, and so on and so forth. I would definitely recommend this kit if you're interested in building a tank transporter or a large truck. This is a beautiful kit to go and build. I hope if you're maybe in the market for buying one of these that this was helpful. It's a lovely, lovely kit. Don't hesitate to buy into it. If you're in two minds, just do it. Okay, thanks for looking in, everyone. Stay safe, and I will see you soon.